Okay, now that we've created the webhook, I'm in my review code under settings, and you can see I have the secret set and the webhook set. And the next thing I want to do is set up the automation in the model registry. To do that, from my Teams page, I'm going to go to the model registry. Now, it's helpful if you already have a registry with some models in it. If you don't, we'll point to some scripts that you can use to hydrate a model registry with some models if you don't already have that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a specific registry. I'll go to this Tiny Llama one and go to View Details. When you view details, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you want to click on New Automation. So in this new automation, you're going to want to select an event type. What I suggest doing to get started is make the event type an alias is added to a model version, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. An alias regex is just a pattern matching string that you want to listen for. In this case, I'm gonna match a specific string called candidate. Make sure you spell it right, because if you don't, then it might confuse you later. And then action type is webhooks. And then we'll go to the next step. And in the next step, we're going to select a webhook. Now, we already created a webhook for this project, and we called it modal webhook test. The next thing we want to do is specify the payload. This is the information that we are going to send to that webhook server. Now, you already know what this means. That payload, if you recall, if I open that curl.sh, is really this stuff right here. This is the payload. And you're just telling weights and biases to send a payload like this. Now, instead of hard coding these strings like John Doe and event type, these are variables that you can weights and biases will inject into the payload. And I'll show you that in a moment. So going back to the README, we can copy and paste this payload. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste it here. And this is the payload. Now you see this syntax here. This just means string stuff substitution. And these are variables that weights and biases will inject into the payload. And this is a kind of a table of contents, if you will, of the different kinds of variables that you can add and what they mean. So event type just means, for example, the type of event that triggered the action. The author will be the user that triggered the action. So instead of hard coding it with John Doe, it should actually, if I trigger this action, this should be Hamill. This should be my name. And so on and so forth. So this is very meaningful. This payload actually contains useful information that you can then react to. For example, if you have the artifact version and the project name and entity name, you can then pull that artifact in your webhook. For example, you can download the model. You can do some post-processing. You can do all kinds of testing and do other things. And so it's information that you can react to. So once we're satisfied with the payload, we can go to next step. And we can name our automation. I'm going to call this modal 1db. And the description is optional. We don't have to add that. In real production scenarios, I recommend adding a description just in case you forget what it's for. And then we can click Create Automation. So this is a new automation. And basically what happens is if I add a tag to any model with the tag candidate, then it will trigger this webhook. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to a specific model. Let's go to one of these models here, version 1. So I'm going to go click on View. And on here, I'm going to add the tag candidate. Now, why candidate? Well, that's the trigger that I set when I set up the when I set up the automation, if you recall. But just more generally speaking, this is kind of like a signal that you might want to review something, or you might want to do something intermediate, like test something. So this is why I chose the word candidate, but you can choose anything you want. So I'm going to add the tag candidate. You can see the tag has been added. Now let's go back to our modal app and look at the logs and see if anything has changed. Oh, wow. Okay. So this was the payload from when we called weights and biases locally with that John Doe and everything. But this one is sent from weights and biases. So we have the event author, which is me, Hamel SMU. That's my weights and biases username. This is the weights and biases artifact. This is the version. This is the name of the project, Tiny Llama, and this is the project, or this is the name of the team. This is the name of the project, and so this is all information that you can use to interact with the assets and weights and biases. So that is how you just set up an integration between weights and biases and modal. You just set up a way to trigger updates that, tags that you update here can then trigger some specific action, can trigger specific actions on an external machine learning system. And this is very powerful. This is just the beginning. This is the very minimal setup, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can trigger different things to take place. And then in the next video, I'm going to go over some exercises that you can use to develop your intuition a bit further.